A poster shared a very interesting comment. The poster shared, "So sad to see you like this, Jeff. It's never too late to turn it all around and start celebrating the diversity that is music. There's not one way to play, and there never was. Get over it, bro." Fair enough, and this opened up a beautiful topic that I'm about to discuss here on this episode of And Nothing But the Truth. I think that possibly one of the most difficult concepts for bass players to understand, and it's one that I've tried to explain many times, is that playing and learning, or being taught, are different. Playing and learning and being taught are different. They're so different that they're direct opposites. Learning, being taught, is a regard of music you don't know, and you're practicing it in order to learn the music, and you're practicing it on the bass. Playing music is an instantaneous and spontaneous output of music that you already know how to play. The difficulty, I believe, in the thinking of a lot of bass players is that they cannot separate the two principles, that one learns and then one plays. So when this poster shared that there's not one way to play, I 100% agree. And this is the reality of the art of music, that there's an infinite way that people tend to go about playing the bass and expressing their ideas. But again, this is a beautiful example where I'm convinced that most of the bass community is a little confused, because this is not a rare comment. I get these comments all the time. There's lots of ways to play. There's lots of ways, and it's absolutely true, and it's not something I've ever said anything against. People might want to review the thoughts that I share, because my intention was to make it absolutely clear. When people used to comment, "Well, I play with a drummer, or I play in a band," and I said, "Yeah, but that's performance. You guys should be learning, and learning is an out-of-time thing." That's why it's one of the great tenets against metronomes, or one of the great views against metronome that I have. And the response is, "Well, what about playing and recording with a click track? That's a performance principle." And then it became clearer and clearer that people in our community might benefit from hearing, again, this message. And I'm asking people to share it, but you will get argument, because people don't understand that there's a difference between learning how to play and playing. And I believe the reason they don't understand it is because their teachers don't understand it. You can't abide by a philosophy related to the instrument if people haven't been told it online, or haven't read or heard it from teachers that they admire. This brings me up to reasons that I feel people have this a little backwards. The events that bass teachers put on, the teaching of groove, the teaching of feel, the teaching of the supportive element of bass playing, which feels good but does not lend itself to your musical improvement. And it's this thing that I really feel has set back bass players, some of which can't recover from it. And part of the reason is they're determined not to. The things that I share, as I've said before, didn't originate with me. The learning of music is certainly not a concept I came up with. The practicing of music out of time, the daily regard of it, the review and the practice, and the review and the practice, and separating the concept from playing itself. It isn't a popular or even an understood philosophy in the bass community. Groove. I have to go first to groove because everybody emphasized it and still does. right into Berkeley, which ought to be telling people to play out of time, practice these exercises and learn the music and learn it on your instrument. Groove has overemphasized performance instead of learning how to play. And it is the teachers that emphasize groove that have offered, I believe, a philosophy that has made it almost impossible for bass players to recover from it. I'm so alone in the philosophy of this, but like I said, if I happen to one day become a flute teacher or, a classical teacher, no one's going to shrug their shoulders at anything I share, because the principles I share are, hey, flute player, here's this etude, here's this technical thing, and here's how it's written out. So go practice it. There's no surprise here. In the bass community, it's only surprise, which was the reason for that post. There's lots of ways to play. Of course there are. Now, adult men and women do not require the teaching of the principles of performance. People are new to the bass as adults. Adults meaning that some people have been recruited and encouraged to become bass players. The bass community does that, I think, where they say, you ought to be a bass player, or you ought to find your way through music. The one principle left out is music generally isn't taught by anybody that encourages you to buy a bass. I really encourage you to be a chef. I have no recipes and I can't tell you how to use a stove, but really encourage you how to do it. There is a lack of follow-through in the bass community by emphasizing the encouraging element of you should be a musician and music is beautiful. And everything is beautiful when it is free-flowing and comes out in that sort of, ethereal, spiritual form. But everything that does has had a heck of a lot of sweat and grit that preceded the liberty that came later. And that's why I think this bass player who wrote me, and I think it's worth repeating, so sad to see you like this, Jeff, because I criticized the teacher. It's never too late to turn it around and start celebrating the diversity that is music. That's an interesting comment. I fall asleep listening to Chopin, Beethoven, jazz. I'm quite diverse in my listening. There's not one way to play, and there never was. No, there isn't. But there is one or two ways to teach how to play. One way is through the academic approach of music, which bass teachers are not telling you, and never have, that music is enough. They've not taught it as an exclusive principle right up to Berkeley. And the reason I mention Berkeley often is because Berkeley ought to be, as I've said in other videos, the pinnacle example of musical greatness in the world. It has more than an obligation, because it's a business charging the tuitions that it charges. By its reputation, it has an obligation, especially in my opinion, to the bass players, because that's my sensitivity part, where the bass players have to be taught properly, must be taught properly. And I don't agree with the fact that a teacher or a department person or somebody or committee may come up with a varieties of ways of teaching that really have no precedence in music education. I made a big deal about clinics because I don't believe that named bass players should teach. I don't think bass players that are excellent players are necessarily qualified to teach. They're qualified to play. And it has been, I think, a detriment to the bass community where any clinician going to a school for a photo op and for hanging and for doing a Q&A, and this is passed off as educational when students will leave thinking, wow, that was so great, and not have anything that they can use concretely to follow up with it. What's concretely? This harmonic principle. The lack of that is why I think this bass player got things wrong, or whatever he plays, and that I would encourage everyone again to review and not forget and spread the word, because you haven't heard it from your bass teachers, you haven't heard it at schools or camps or events or anywhere, that music and the learning of it and the learning of your instrument is different than playing. They don't even relate. And I think it's important that people understand this. So I hope this was a good episode. Please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the alert button. I'll be back for more episodes. Thank you very much.